Hi, this is Pat Hillberg, and I am interviewing John Stark, who is a prolific writer in PLM books about his most recent work, which is called Products 2019. I teach a graduate level engineering course called Product Lifecycle Management, and originally it was very technology oriented. But over the past decade, I realized that product lifecycles are driven more by culture and practices of the organization than by the engineering technology. So I really try to bring that into my class. I was really happy to find a book that gave a firsthand account of a character who is following the development process through a fictional but very realistic organization. In fact, the book opens with a new CEO who is simply trying to understand how his new company works. John, thank you so much. After hearing my summary, how would you as the author like to summarize the book?
First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me for this discussion. It's a pleasure to be here. Turning to the Products 29 book, it narrates a project carried out by an MBA student for a newly appointed CEO of a machine tool company with about 5,000 employees to find out what happens with the company's products from their beginning to their end. The project runs over several months. The student, Jane, interviews more than 100 executives, managers, and subject matter experts from more than 40 departments, groups, and sections on several company sites to understand the flow of product-related activities and information and the applications supporting them. She also asks these people about their business processes and operating procedures, and she asks interviewees to outline the issues they face in their product-related activities and make suggestions for improvement. So the reader gets a good idea of what all these people in the company are doing. And while she's interviewing these people, she's also trying to put their answers together so that she can explain to the CEO what happens with the company's products from their beginning to their end.
What led you to write the book in such a narrative style?
Prior to this book, I'd written several books on CAD and PLM, engineering data management, product data management, but I had written them all in a textbook style. So they had chapters on clearly defined and clearly separate subjects, such as product data, business processes, applications, project management, organizational change management, vision and strategy, and so on. And one of these books, I think, had 32 chapters. And several people had suggested to me that I could try writing a book with a storyline and also a book that was more focused on the product than on the applications and the processes.
I've run PLM implementation projects very similar to what Jane was beginning to undertake in the book. There are details which describe workflows within Myers, and there's even extensive details in terms of what Jane eats when she's at breakfast and at dinner in the inn where she stays. Actually, I was quickly reminded of my own trips to Bavaria on a similar PLM project. And literally this morning, I read a review of the book from Share PLM, and the writer talks about it here, and she says, this brought back so many memories for me of my visits to German companies. Back in those days, face-to-face meetings were still possible. Our PLM colleagues would walk us across departments and manufacturing plants and would enthusiastically explain what their company's products consisted of. So Bea at Share PLM had a very similar experience to mine. So the reader follows the sort of conversations which need to occur in the early stages of architecting a PLM system at Meyer. What brought you to this?
I think I was trying to do something different. That the previous books I had written didn't have a narrative approach. They had this other approach, which might be called textbook or reference book, but they were very dry, very factual, which in a way is good, but it also has this problem that it can be slightly boring and can tend to send people to sleep. So I thought it'd be good to try and write something which had an approach like a novel and was telling a story. And it wasn't intended to start with, but it finished up with Products 2019, describing the things that are happening on each day of a project, the project that Jane is given by the CEO of the company. And the more I started writing it, the more this day-by-day approach grew, and the more the narrative approach appeared. And I wonder if it's not because the book isn't really reflecting the reality that I have lived through as a consultant, because the reality in a manufacturing company is that there are a lot of people, and they do communicate mainly by talking, by exchanging information.
What type of reader did you have in mind when you were writing the book?
It's strange because now when I think about it, I see that students taking product-related courses, are a potential reader, but I didn't really have them in mind to start with. Or if I did, they were the third group. I had two other groups before them. The first is actually people working on product-related activities in a manufacturing company. So the employees of a manufacturing company. And then the second group was people in companies that provide products and services to manufacturing companies. So people like PLM consultants. They were the two first groups I saw. And then the third one that has appeared is the students taking product-related courses.
That is very much what first resonated with me, actually, was not as a professor, but as a lead architect, that I really wanted my consultants to go through this, or I want in the future my consultants to go through this book and read things from this sort of a business perspective, that not everything is inherently known, and that the organization that we're working with is not a monolithic thing where everyone agrees on exactly the same approach. So there were so many very technical people on my teams, but I would like in the future for my teams to go through this book in the process or at the beginning of architecting a project, to start recognizing the interpersonal details at the client company that they need to work with as they are consultants. So do you have any feedback from teachers and students who are using the book in classes?
Yes, but perhaps before I answer that, I should just answer what you were
Sure.
talking about there. Over the years, I think I've worked with more than 100 companies, as mainly as a consultant. And one thing that strikes me every time is that the people tend to have very limited scope of work. That if somebody is a manufacturing engineer, they will be working in the manufacturing engineering department, and they'll have very little idea about what is happening in the other areas of the company. They will have some idea, but it's very unlikely they're actually going to be talking to people from marketing, or talking to people from service, or people from the end of the life. And I think you can take any department almost in the company, and apply the same reasoning. If you go in the finance department, they won't know what the manufacturing engineering person is doing, really. They may know where the money is being spent and what are the project numbers and things like that. And so the whole company is split up into, maybe 100 little groups, each called a section or a group or whatever it is. And these people are more or less independent, and they're not aware of what is going on around them in the company. So that was the first type of reader I saw, that to give that people in all those groups, a view of what is happening throughout the company.
I'll tell you, one of the favorite student conversations that has ever happened in my course, and it was a few years ago, it was two people from the same large automaker. One worked in product development, the other worked in one of the manufacturing plants, and they clearly didn't have any clue what the life of the other person was like. So the product developer could talk in great detail about how they design products and how they work with the suppliers and how they manage change and that sort of thing. And then the person from the manufacturing plant said, I have machines that are older than I am, and I'm just trying to keep the machines working. So it was kind of a Mars and Venus sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And other students at the end of the semester, which was another 7 or 8 weeks later, came back and talked about that conversation as being particularly meaningful to them. So I think there is definitely something there that you've captured with Products 2019.
Well, one of the things about Products 2019 is that Jane goes to several sites. So she starts off in the south of Germany and she builds up a picture of what she thinks is happening there. And then she goes to the north of Germany and it's a different organization. Even when she looks at the organization chart, I think in North Germany, there may be 5 people reporting to the CEO in North Germany, whereas in the South, I think there were more people reporting to the boss in the South. And then she goes to France, and it's another picture as well. And that's at the top level. And the more you go down, the more and more different it gets.
This came up in my most recent class just this past week, where one student and their numbers that agreed with them said, I'm trying to get something done and I can't figure out who's responsible for it. And I can't find a good organizational chart in order to figure out who, even the manager of the person that's responsible for it. So, but let me come back to my question about what sort of feedback and how of teachers and students, and how are teachers making use of the book in their class.
Well, the book was published on July the 4th last year, which I believe is an important day for you.
We have holidays on that day.
Okay. So I must have been working on that day. So it's been out, I guess, 9 months or something like that. And so far, as far as I know, it's being used in courses in 7 universities. The people I hear more from are the students, because there are more of them. I think on one of the courses, there were something like 25. And on another one, I believe there were 35. And so whereas I hear that, the one voice coming back from the instructor, I usually get comments from many students. And I think they find it very easy to read. It's not a question of learning about, what is the equation that governs friction, or what is thermodynamics. It's a story, and they can read it. And as they read it, they're learning about what is happening in a company. And I think that's why it's appreciated by the instructors as well, because in a way, it's a simulation of the environment in a manufacturing company. So the students don't have to go out to do just to work as an intern in a company. They read the book and they find out what is happening in the company. Actually, they probably get a better picture from the book than they would if they went to the company, because again, they would just be working with one person in the company. Some of the instructors have set up little projects for the students, the most recently being in a 3-credit course in ETS Montreal, which is one of Canada's leading engineering faculties. And apparently the 30 students there, I think it was 35 actually, they were split into small groups and they were given a 7-week project based on the book. And then the first task was to create the organization charts, what you were talking about just before. They had to create the organization charts for each of the company's sites. And then they had to show how the product data was moving between the site's different departments, groups, and sections. And it was the instructor who came up with that activity for them. But I think it was a good one.
Yes, I saw that comment actually in something you posted on LinkedIn recently, and I did kind of a oh my gosh moment, because I had written exactly that note into the book when I was reading it in terms of how to bring it into my class. Can you figure out what the organization, because as you're walking through the organization trying to understand how products flow, which is kind of a horizontal thing at the bottom of the organizational chart, it keeps changing managers. I mean, the product keeps changing managers, and you're working with people who are associated with the product. Can you figure out what that organizational chart is that those people are working for? And can you figure out the boundary lines where it's shifting from one manager or one budget to a different budget? So
I've had different responses from students. Some have said, why didn't you include an organization chart in the book? And then I remember another one said, if you're going to read this book, you should have a piece of paper and a pencil next to you. And I thought that was a great comment, because that shows understanding. I think that's, what the person should be doing. If you can't understand what you're reading in a book, you start making some little notes to try and help you understand.
I think it's very important for students to realize that it's hard to figure out the organizational chart, and as they follow Jane through the process, getting them to getting the students to develop the organizational chart is an important part that I'm going to find a way to work into my class. And it's nice to hear that some other professors are doing that as well. But maybe the other we professors who are doing it need to come to some agreement on what that organizational chart is, right? So, or maybe our own differences are important too.
Well, I remember when I was writing it that I said to myself, should I put an organizational chart in? And I decided against it. I thought, if it is there in the book, the reader's just going to look at it for 5 seconds and they won't really understand, what it is, and how all the parts fit together. Whereas if they have to make it themselves, then they really have to understand what is happening. And that is what the book is about, really, understanding what is happening in the company.
And maybe this is what has resonated so much with me about it, actually, is one of my key points is that decomposition leads to dysfunction, and that we decompose the work of a complex product into multiple different managers and directors and vice presidents, and more importantly, into multiple different budgets. And there's this competing desire to create a great product while simultaneously staying inside multiple different budgets. And I talk in a different place in class that's where the friction tends to be, is between one budget and another. So I really enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed watching Jane's challenge in trying to figure out, okay, what is really happening in this company.
Because I think there are different levels in the book. There are different stories. At one level, there's a story of her doing her research project for her MBA, because there are occasions when she really is thinking about her model. It's often at the weekend she sits down at the breakfast table and she makes little drawings about how she thinks the company could be. So that's really that's her research project. And then there's another level which is describing the current situation in the company. And then the third level, when you get towards the end of the book, she's trying to put together a new picture of how the products are really going through the company. So she gets into more of a business process oriented picture.
And Jane, I'm recalling this, that it was one Saturday morning breakfast where she's trying to organize her notes into the flow of the product lifecycle. And she comes to that. She's not just handed 5 phases of the product lifecycle. She comes to a realization that there are 5 phases of the product lifecycle. And I think that's an important thing to not just, to your point earlier about not having a reference book, the struggle of learning what's going on reinforces learning that much better. I don't want to define your phases of the product lifecycle. Ideation, and then
definition. Realization, support and use, retirement and recycling.
Realization, okay, which would tend to be the manufacturing part at this point, right?
But I make it realization because the product could be software, and the software in a way isn't manufactured. You can say it's realized.
Sure, right. Support and use, and I make this point in class. I have generally product development engineering managers in my class, and they tend to forget about, I shouldn't say it that way, they're wonderful students, but it's easy in the product development stage to forget about the fact that once development is done, there's 15 years of a product lifecycle after that point, right? And that's where you're actually making your money. And I think getting into recycle and, I'm sorry, what was your phrase? Retirement. So I think that starts to get into something that's quite important, which would be the circular economy, and how do we make used components after they come out of their first product and go into their second product. So I was very happy to see that was a key piece. As the author, what benefits do you hope people will gain from reading Products 2019?
I think the overall benefit is to get a better understanding of what is happening with a company's products as they go through their life cycle from the start to the end. And one of the things that comes from the book and that readers have mentioned to me is that there are actually different starts and there are different ends. Because I think the way we often talk about it as if there's one starting place and one ending place for all the product in the company. But what Jane sees is that there are actually 5 or 6 different starting places, I think, where the product can start, and it can also end in different places. So I think that's the overall benefit, but it's a different kind of value for different people. Some people who are in product innovation will see it one way. If they're in product management, I think, they're going to see it in a different way, and they'll also get different benefits. And then another thing that's happening a lot in companies is all these initiatives like Industry 4.0, digital transformation, circular economy. It will help people to understand and participate in those activities. And then finally, I think it's very good for the students because they get a good understanding of what happens with the manufacturing company's products from their beginning of life to their end. But that reminds me of something that you just said beforehand. One of the students said to me, he didn't believe the part of the story in which Jane finishes her first part of the work, and then she's hired as a consultant to continue with the next part of the work. The student said, that doesn't make sense to me. I can't understand that. She's just a student. The company knows what it's doing. Why would they hire her? And I think my answer was, she probably knows more than anyone else in the company by that time about what is actually happening. Because like you were saying, she was sitting down there at breakfast for, many weekends, wasn't she? I mean, 5, 6, 7 days she was down there thinking about it. She's put the whole picture together on the whiteboard, and she's put it together. She has something else. She has 3 whiteboards, I think, and she has some flip charts, I think, and she's got all of the, she's got lists of all the programs and the applications and the documents on all the sites. So I think she actually has a huge, knowledge about what is happening in that company. And the CEO has understood, that she is a very valuable person, because he could go out and hire a consultant, highly experienced, so-called consultant from a well-known software developer, but that person wouldn't know anything at all, about his company, whereas Jane really knows everything.
It's interesting because I quibbled on that same spot in the book, but from a completely opposite direction. I couldn't understand why Meyer, I'm sorry, it was Dr. Bender, correct?
Yep.
Is the CEO?
Yep.
I couldn't understand why Dr. Bender didn't hire her and put her into a vice presidential position. So it's like, are you kidding? This person, to your point, she had a better understanding of how the company ran than anyone else in the company. So I think that's the sort of talent that you would grab up right away. But it's not my position to describe how a fictional CEO should do his job, right? So. Okay, so we've chatted a little bit, and I've asked you about this before. What are your thoughts on a follow-up book?
This is a difficult one. We could perhaps start with, what were my thoughts when I started on Products 2019, and the intention really was to get towards the implementation of product lifecycle management in the company. That was what it was meant to be doing. But as I started writing, it seemed to be getting longer and longer, and yet it was getting nowhere near the end, of where it should have been. It wasn't getting anywhere near where product lifecycle management would be coming in. So I thought about it, and I thought, well, how far shall I go? Jane is doing her job. She's describing the current situation. And then probably after that, they would have a project, decide what they want to do in the future. And then after that, they would actually implement something. But by this time, I think I was already at 360 pages or something like that. So I thought it's better that I leave some of that, for other books. Otherwise, I'm going to get up to 1,000 pages. then I think nobody would read 1,000 pages. So there are actually different possibilities for the follow-on books, and I'm not really sure, what to do next. I think it would depend a lot on what the readers suggest, what they think should come next.
Actually, I'd love to see a book club of the professors who are teaching this book, and maybe we can come up with some things and either ideas for the next book or develop cases or something of that sort based on this book.
Good idea.
So, John, I really appreciate this. I really appreciated the book. I appreciate this lecture. I'll get the lecture up in front of my class. I read it a little late this year to really put it into the 2021, the January 2021 class. But I'm looking for ways to get it into the class next year. And then also looking for ways to connect with some of the other professors who are teaching it.
That's good to hear. I'm sure the students will learn from it, and I hope we can do something with the other instructors, with the other professors. It would be good to do something, that you can do online. But until then, Pat, I have to say thank you very much for inviting me to this discussion, and goodbye.
Terrific. Thanks much, John. Goodbye.